Hello and welcome to Views on News. I am Jawad Hami. Pakistan's Foreign Office has denounced the provocative remarks made by India's Defence Minister in an interview in response to media revelation regarding India's clandestine operations in Pakistan. The Foreign Office said, let me quote, India's assertion of its preparedness to extrajudicially execute more civilians arbitrarily pronounced as terrorists inside Pakistan constitutes a clear admission of culpability, unquote. Now, Indian Defence Minister's response came when Guardian in its report revealed how India's Foreign Intelligence Agency began to carry out assassinations abroad as part of an emboldened approach to the national security after 2019. And this particular date of 2019 refers to the Pulwama terror attack, to which, without giving any concrete evidence, India had been pointing fingers towards Pakistan. Later on, we saw a major development. The former governor of Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, Satyapal Malik, had said that Pulwama attack happened due to incompetence and carelessness of the Modi government, to which Pakistan's Foreign Office responded by saying that his statements vindicated Pakistan's stance. Also, we know for a fact that earlier in January, Pakistan's Foreign Secretary Cyrus Sajjad Qazi, in a very important presser, had revealed the credible evidence of links between Indian agents and assassination of the two Pakistani nationals on Pakistani soil. Now, similar sort of allegations have been made by Canada, having credible evidence of India's involvement in the murder of a Sikh Canadian citizen on the Canadian soil. Also, the United States of America claimed to have thwarted an assassination attempt by Indian agents of a Canadian US national on its soil. We'll be talking about this particular high-handedness by the Indian regime, the Indian government and its agents and intelligence agencies' involvement in the assassinations and assassination attempts on the foreign soils. How alarming are the new revelations which have been made in its report by The Guardian. To discuss all that, we are honored to have been joined in the studio by Mr. Nasir Ali Khan, his former ambassador. Mr. Khan, thank you very much for your time, for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. Also on Skype, we are honored to have been joined by Dr. Qamar Cheema, his foreign affairs expert. Dr. Cheema, thank you very much for your time, also for being with us on the show tonight. We really appreciate that. Mr. Khan, if you allow me, let me begin the discussion with Dr. Cheema. Dr. Cheema, now with every single passing day, we see more and more revelations regarding India's Indian regimes, its intelligence agencies and its agents being involved in assassination or the assassination attempts on the foreign soils. So how alarming is this particular pattern when we talk about the approach of the Indian government? Dr. Cheema, unfortunately, we can't hear you properly. We'll try to reconnect with you. Mr. Khan, how alarming is this particular trend that we see establishing, especially when we look at these new revelations which have been made by The Guardian, an independent foreign broadcast media outlet?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, I'm not alarmed by it, because we know that this has been happening in the past, and we have expressed our objections to it, our dismay at such things, and we've appealed to the international community also. Our case is further strengthened by the fact that a country like Canada has accused India's officials of being involved in these acts, in similar acts, and they would not have accused them if they did not have sufficient proof. Then there's the case in the United States as well. So at the end of the day, basically the difference that it's made is that this being an election year, India's sort of hateful rhetoric basically is fueling the hyper-nationalist sentiments within India, especially in this year. Because I was very disappointed to hear a spokesperson from even the Congress party. You see, the Congress party in the past, for instance, in the Pulwama case, actually said that they suspect this is a false flag operation. But this time around, because it's the election year, even the Congress party is saying things like they have not done enough, they should be doing more. And then they are trying to quote the instances like Indira Gandhi, the action she took against Pakistan in terms of the 71 war, etc., to boast about such things. So, you know, the important thing is India, which claims to be the largest democracy in the world and also aspires for a permanent seat in the Security Council, if it does not respect international law and their own defense minister is willing to say that we are going to cross a border and do an act which is clearly extrajudicial, these people have never been indicted, they have never been tried, and they have never been convicted of anything. So clearly, this is a case where they don't seem to care about international law.
Right, you already mentioned about this particular statement made by Indian Defense Minister. Of course, by the very face of it, it's very provocative of saying that we will enter Pakistan to kill them. Those people who were not even indicted and let alone convicted. So we see another statement when this particular Guardian report was being published. The authors of this report contacted the Ministry of External Affairs of India also, which denied the allegations which has been made, citing the documents by this particular media outlet. Now, by comparing these two statements, first, on one side, we see the denial coming from the Ministry of External Affairs, which is referred to an earlier statement of the Minister of External Affairs, S.J. Shankar, that the targeted killings in other countries were not the government of India's policy. This is an 180-degree opposite statement when we talk about this statement that came from the Defense Minister. What does that basically depict?
You see, this kind of statement is not new from the BJP leadership. In the past, you can see a video of Prime Minister Modi saying exactly the same thing. You know, this is months or maybe over a year ago. So this is something, it's a deliberate effort. On the one side, you try to deny it in an official manner so that you have some kind of plausible deniability, but on the other side, this is clearly something that is for the consumption of the Indian public. And it's a very foolish tactic because you see, in the international community, it does not give them any extra respect.
That is exactly the point. So even if such type of statements are being made for the domestic consumption, what sort of a fallout or impact or effect it might have when it comes to that perception of the international community about some of the top leaders sitting in the government?
Well, it is state terrorism. We can actually state this is state terrorism because you cannot enter another country and commit acts of terror. And these people, by the way, mostly are dissidents. They are not terrorists. It's just a simple, I mean, there were many countries in the past who were committing assassinations in Europe and in the UK and all. They were all condemned soundly by Western Europe and North American countries. So, I mean, this is not going to do India any good. But having said that, a very curious and interesting fact is that you see, the article in The Guardian, the person who wrote it is based in New Delhi. Without proper proof and proper documentation, if he were to publish an article like that, the first thing would be that he would have been thrown out of India. And secondly, the newspaper could possibly have been sued in the UK by the Indian government. But the interesting part that I'm talking about is who stands to benefit from something like that? It is the BJP government that stands to benefit, because once this news comes out, we can show that we are very strong on national security, and that is something that plays well in an election year.
So what does that actually depict when we talk about a certain state that claims to be having higher aims, it claims to have good relations with the leading powers in the Western Hemisphere? What does that basically depict? Already you mentioned that it also claims to be the largest democracy in the world. What does that actually depict about the overall mindset behind this particular approach?
There's duplicity, there's cowardice in this. Why? Because could you say the same thing about the United States? Could the Indian Defense Minister say that, yes, we will go in the United States and and we will handle any so-called self-proclaimed that we say are terrorists, or say that about Canada. Or why not say that we'll do this in China, where 4,000 square kilometers of territory, there's protests in Ladakh, they're saying that we don't. The other party, on the other hand, goes back and talks about Aksai Chin, and this is all a political rhetoric. They are fighting an election, and a lot of these are false flags, you see.
So regarding that particular claim that was made by the U.S. authorities of thwarting an assassination attempt of a U.S. Canadian citizen on the U.S. soil, there was subsequently a sort of investigation that took place domestically in India, which claimed that it was not Indian government's involvement, rather there was an agent which went rogue. So there came a clarification. So that particular allegation made an impact.
Well, my question is, what was the so-called agent doing in the United States? An agent that went rogue. You see, that there are many instances where they have got sleeper cells in other countries, and there are many proofs available of them inducting or employing either poor Pakistanis who are based in these countries or basic criminals. They sometimes also make it look as if this would be against anti-Islamic elements that are planning things in Pakistan, and use organizations like the Daesh and all to actually assassinate people who are Indian dissidents.
Right, we are honored to have been joined by another participant in the show, Lieutenant General retired Raza Khan, Senior Analyst and former President of the National Defense University. General Raza Khan, thank you very much for your time, for being with us on the show tonight. We really appreciate that. With every single passing day, we see more revelations about India's regimes, its foreign intelligence agencies and its agents being involved in assassination or assassination attempts on the foreign soil. Now, this particular detailed report citing the documentation published by Guardian, which is of course been denied by India's Ministry of External Affairs. How alarming is this particular trend or a pattern that we see developing on the part of Indian regime's approach?
Okay, Bismillah Rahman Rahim. Can you hear me?
Please go ahead, loud and clear, sir.
First of all, I think this Guardian story has actually revealed a lot of information based on their own research. But it's quite possible that this has been planted or managed or commissioned by India itself. I say so because the election in India are going to start on the 19th of April. And there could be many purposes for that. One is that they would try, to build the image of BJP and Modi as very strong on Pakistan and elsewhere, with people whom they branded as terrorists, show that to the people and, get votes from them. And of course, we are aware that because of these elections, there is not much with the BJP to show the people, like major economic development initiatives, new initiatives, or things like that, except relying on these kinds of drama. And also because traditionally their elections have been Pakistan centric, unfortunately Kashmir centric, construction of mandirs and things like that, and economy has never been a role in that. So they're trying to, I think, deceive their own people through these kinds of stories. Coming back to the story itself, while it talks of 20 Pakistanis being murdered from 2020 till 2024, there is some exaggeration in this because according to our Foreign Office, in January this year, I think they talked about two Pakistanis being killed, about whom we have the evidence, and all the financial and supporters, logistic providers, they have been arrested, and we have their statements. And that Foreign Office communique also said that there are a few other cases which are being investigated, and that once that investigation finishes, then we will reveal further details also. But right now, what is needed is that whatever information we have in the form of dossiers or evidence, I think because the Indian Defense Minister, he has admitted that India has been, carrying out such heinous crimes outside India, and even Mr. Modi, only a week back, in one of his election rallies, he said that India is now different, and it goes inside people's homes to kill them, forgetting that that's not applicable, if they have entered into Pakistan, because whenever they have dared to enter Pakistan, it has always been suicidal for them, and they've been humiliated through their so-called, surgical strikes, whether they were through air attacks or through ground attacks, and now through these, murder attacks through hired assassins. And they also know that we have been capturing the perpetrators. Some are still in jail. Others were released, after a good cup of tea, for the sake of peace in the subcontinent. So while we are, a very responsible nuclear power, and we will be actually exercising strategic restraint, I think India must know that we have multiple options available when it comes to the response from our side, and they're always on the table.
Right. Your point is well taken. We're joined by Dr. Qamar Cheema, foreign affairs expert on the phone line. Dr. Cheema, now there are two different statements. So one, when we talk about this report that's been published by a Guardian, when it contacted the Ministry of External Affairs of India, it denied the allegations which have been cited by this particular report by Guardian. On the other hand, the statement which came from India's defense minister, which has been denounced, of course, by Pakistan's Foreign Office, which says we will enter Pakistan to kill them. As earlier discussion we've had with Mr. Khan, to kill them, those people are not even indicted, let alone convicted. How do you see these two different statements? Aren't they completely opposite?
Well, thank you very much. I think as far as this Defense Minister Rajnath Singh's statement is concerned, in my understanding, that was a very provocative statement, and perhaps the international community has not taken notice of this. For long, international community has ignored that the bellicosity or the arrogance which we see in the attitudes of the incumbent political dispensation in India, and how things can get out of control. I think international community needs to be sensitized on this, and particularly when Canada and America, they have themselves felt that how the Indian deep state wanted to eliminate some of the Canadian citizens and some of the American citizens. I think Pakistan doesn't need to make its point clear to the international society. Then there is a
Dr.
question.
Cheema, I seek your pardon for the interjection. That is exactly the point. After, in September, the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau saying that they were pursuing credible allegation linking India to the death of a Sikh leader who was shot in June. Later on, we saw the claims made by the US itself regarding thwarting an assassination attempt of a US-Canadian citizen on the US soil. Why Pakistan needs to sensitize the international community more when such type of revelations in the Western world had already been made?
Well, the sensitization is necessary to put a pressure on in India. For that matter, that India must do an inquiry within its rank and file what has actually happened. So, for instance, the American government is asking Indians to unearth what has actually happened, and for that matter, someone from the Indian government was quoted that some rogue elements were involved. But the American administration, particularly the Matthew Miller, the U.S. State Department spokesperson, specifically asked for a full-scale investigation of that what has actually happened. So Pakistan has not shown consistency in asking India that why that the Pakistanis who have been killed, why there is no inquiry. For instance, if you remember, the Foreign Secretary did a press conference in January, and now this is April. And in between January and April, there is no mention of such kind of actions by the Pakistani government. So consistency is required. So had there not been a Guardian report a few days back,
No, when you talk, Dr. Cheema, I'll hold you for a second over here. When you talk of Pakistan asking India to make an inquiry into those allegations with credible evidence which were made by Pakistan's Foreign Secretary in January, do you think even if Pakistan continues to ask India, the kind of approach or the mindset at play within India's regime at the moment is they would be seriously taking up Pakistan's concern and would actually go into making any sort of an inquiry into that? Rather, we have seen by carrying out false flag operations in the past, back in 2019, when specifically talk about Pulwama attack, they, without any concrete evidence or a solid proof, they straight away start pointing fingers towards Pakistan. How would they consider Pakistan's request to go into inquiry?
well, I think it's not that what will be their stance. The question is that how we put things in place. And for that matter, we should have taken that very seriously. Our political dispensation should have discussed it at every global platform, everywhere wherever they go, and we get a platform quite often. Recently, Foreign Minister was in Brussels. The question is, see, wherever we find an opportunity, Pakistan needs to talk. It's not just a matter of we pick and choose. Sometimes we want to talk and sometimes we don't want to talk. So, in my understanding, what I believe is a consistent approach is required, and for that, if you just look at from the American administration, they are continuously pursuing and asking Indian administration to hold a full-scale inquiry, but at the same time, they are having excellent bilateral relations with India. So I think, and similarly with the Canadians, they are pressurizing India, but they are having business, trade, and everything is going on. So for that matter, Pakistan's relation with the India is completely different. But I think we should keep on saying, talking, speaking, raising this narrative. Otherwise, if the 20 people have been killed very discreetly somewhere in Sialkot, Daska, Lahore, Karachi, and we just came to know through a patron. Otherwise, we may not have known this. So, and above all, the people who have been killed, only few of those investigations are completed. What about the investigations of other people? So I think we need a consistency in our approach when we highlight such kind of things. I think that will help us to further pressurize India to reach to a conclusion that why India is using transnational terrorist network for this extrajudicial killings in foreign lands.
So when there is credible proof and evidence, what usually happens with a country like this, the way India is behaving in the Committee of Nations when it comes to the international law or the responsibility of the international institutions which are meant to ensure peace and security around the world?
Well, the question is that normally the countries do not accept what they have done, and particularly in India's case, in my understanding, it is all about Prime Minister Modi and National Security Advisor Ajit Doval's policy to target the Sikhs in foreign lands and to target the Pakistanis in Pakistan. So I think in case they were doing it discreetly, if we keep on talking on this, we keep on raising this issue, it will definitely have an impact. It at least generated a discussion within India. Although the Indian deep state or the Indian government is trying to control the narrative on this, and the society and the media are completely supporting the Indian government, but at the same time, the pressure which is coming from global leaders, particularly the Five Eyes Intelligence Alliance, I think that has put India on a back foot. So from Pakistani side, the case is strong, but our political class, they need to have a more active approach to this situation, which I have seen missing in the last few months.
Right to Dr. Qamar Cheema, Foreign Affairs expert, joining us on the phone line. Thank you very much for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. Mr. Khan, an active approach to sensitize the international community. What could be the broader contours of that active approach on the part of Pakistan? We've seen dossiers being shared with the international community, especially with the United Nations Secretary General, this important presser back in January also. And also at the same time, given for the fact that these cases had been happening in the US as well as in Canada.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. Not only should the pressure be absolutely consistent, and at every forum, at every international multilateral meeting, Pakistan should bring up this issue. In every interview that our leaders give to the international media, on social media platforms, everywhere, we need to make the world aware of what the true behavior of Indians is in the international community. Apart from that, in the case of Canada, for instance, we must make efforts that Pakistanis or Canadians of Pakistani origin must get together to pursue this case, to follow this case so that it doesn't get pushed back on the back burner due to other priorities. Similarly, Pakistanis in the United States, this is also an election year, people listen to them. Pakistani community in the US must be galvanized for this single purpose. If you remember, the Indians have been constantly blaming us and trying to portray us as a terrorist state. And there are huge organizations, fake news organizations on the social media.
The disinformation campaign, which is busted by EU Disinfo.
Yes, and it paints Pakistan in a bad light. So the result of that is that a businessman who wants to come to Pakistan thinks that there's, a lot of risk and danger. And similarly, the truth is, if India wants to become a major economic power, it cannot be perceived as a terrorist state or a state that supports terrorism. Now here you not only have this statement by the defense minister, but also it shows culpability of India in the past incidents, which here up to now they have been denying, you see. So that pressure, I agree absolutely, that pressure ought to be maintained, and at every possible opportunity we must present our case and we must show what India is actually doing.
What about if Pakistan continues to request India to go into an inquiry regarding these two particular cases which were shared with evidence by the Foreign Secretary? We saw that investigation happening in the case of the US assassination attempt that was thwarted. What should be done?
First of all, let me come to the US requesting them to have an investigation. You see, if you are the accused and you're asked to investigate yourself, that doesn't make sense. If you look at the power of the FBI, the CIA, the National Security Agency, I'm sure they are better qualified and they can conduct a far better investigation. So I do not agree with this. But for public, this thing, we should officially ask India to conduct an investigation. But here you have the administration themselves threatening Pakistan. Nothing concrete is going to come out of it. You might get a reply that is just as, baffling as these statements are. But, when I say baffling, we do understand why they are doing this, It's a dangerous game they are playing.
Right. General Raza Khan, you already talked about Pakistan showing restraint despite multiple options available on the table. So what about sensitizing the international community continuously? How important is that? As per your understand, what could be the major contours of that particular sensitizing the international community about it? General Khan, I seek your pardon. Please unmute yourself, please.
I didn't think that I muted. Can you hear me now?
Please, yes.
All right. So what I was saying that our response has to be in multiple domains, and we should continue our efforts, to protect ourselves, to defend ourselves through the political, diplomatic, regional, and international organizations. And when it comes to the diplomatic sort of action, then we have again within that a number of options, like warning the government of India, giving them a démarche or even an ultimatum. At the same time, I think they must know that we have other options. There could be, conventional response option, sub-conventional response option, clandestine options, respond in kind, or a combination of these. But I think what we immediately need to do is that all the raw sleepers and active cells, first of all within Pakistan, I think they must be eliminated on priority, because the supporters or many of the executions is through people who are either from Afghanistan or from Pakistan, or who are working in the UAE or other countries. Similarly, the raw cells, even outside Pakistan, whether they are in the UAE or in Afghanistan or even elsewhere, I think we have the means to make sure that they are neutralized with all means available to us, and at the time and place of our own choosing. We should not also overreact, to this rhetoric which is aimed at victory in elections. Because if we overreact and do something, immediately, it may actually prove counterproductive, and it may actually help the BJP in winning the elections. As I said earlier, I think the government of Pakistan and the armed forces, they, I am sure, have all these options on the table, and the government of India, I think, should be aware of this, and the government must take, all these efforts, all these actions, and undertake the response options depending on the environment at the time, and also include legal options, creating a case against India in the International Criminal Court, because these are all criminal activities that they have undertaken inside Pakistan and in other countries, including, Qatar in the past, and other countries that we talked about.
Right, Ambassador Khan, this particular point of making a legal case and taking it to International Criminal Court, how is that doable?
It is, because there's sufficient evidence.
Isn't there any question of jurisdiction just in the case of ICJ? The consent of both the parties to accept the jurisdiction?
If you remember that the case of Mr. Yadav, Kulbhushan Yadav, it went to an international court. There is no reason that we
It was India which took the case to the
So we
ICJ,
can
right?
do as well. There is an example of this where a bilateral issue like that has been taken to the International Court of Justice. So yes, certainly I would agree with that. If you want to have a strong and positive response, you should explore all possible actions. You see, this is a time where Pakistan itself, for many years now, has been trying to reach out to India. Even one of our recent army chiefs made overtures towards India. So we need to show the world that we are not going to promote violence in the region. We should not be taken as such. Whereas India, on the other hand, is playing a very dangerous game. You see, you are trying to play a game where you have a hostile situation and both these neighbors are nuclear armed. So, if you up the ante and we also respond in kind, there's no saying that the situation would not escalate. So we have to be very careful about this. But my point is, Yes, if you can go to the International Court of Justice, definitely, but keep the pressure on, keep the international community aware of what India is doing. There is incontrovertible evidence. There's a interview on television that you can show to the world that this is how the Indian Defense Minister is talking.
So what about taking this particular case up in the United Nations Security Council before going for the ICC or ICJ?
That it's not impossible, but this doesn't really fit into a Security Council issue. It is more
this pattern of assassinations and assassination attempts.
No, I mean,
if that is going to lead into an escalation between two nuclear armed neighbors, doesn't that come
from that aspect? It could, but I would think if things escalate, then perhaps the rest of the world will also be more interested. Otherwise, I mean, Canada could have taken their case to the Security Council. But Security Council is usually used in matters of more grave concerns which involve, regional security issues which are, quite immediate, you see. But legal remedies, I think, are definitely there, and that all these people who accuse us of harboring terrorists and things like that, we have to show them clearly that India, that aspires to be a large superpower in this area, is not as democratic as you think, and it is not conforming to international law.
Right, India trying to show itself as a superpower over here. This particular report by Guardian, at the very end of it, it quotes Daniel Markey, a senior advisor on South Asia, the United States Institute of Peace, who says of the same thing, being willing to take this sort of action against the perceived threats has been interpreted, at least by some Indians, as a marker of great power status. As a great power status.
Yes.
That is exactly what you just...
Unfortunately. But the international community does not agree to such things. On the one hand, because of the economic power of India or the fact that it is a lucrative market for Western countries is one thing. But at the end of the day, you need to share certain values with the rest of Western society.
Right. General Raza Khan, there is another mention of a very important thing here in this particular Guardian report that talks about the involvement of Afghan nationals who've been paid millions of rupees to carry out the shootings. Now, this had always been in the recent past, when there was a resurgence of terrorism here in Pakistan, the Pakistani authorities saying that there is credible evidence regarding Afghan nationals' involvement in perpetrating these terror activities here in Pakistan. Your understanding about this mention in this particular report?
Well, I think these Afghan nationals could either be residents of the UAE. That is, I think, it makes more sense because the UAE is actually inundated with raw agents, and I think if you pass through Dubai airport, and if there is somebody important, actually Indian operatives are employed in the garb of laborers who handle the luggage, and they open their luggage and they steal valuable documents from their unaccompanied luggage. So we have to be very careful and very vigilant in the using of the UAE airports and also inside Pakistan. I think the government has now taken the right decisions that all unregistered refugees must return home, which is started, and in the second phase, even the registered refugees under a phased program must go back. Simultaneously, I think our national action plan and provincial action plan, in particular, I'm talking of improving the capacity of the counter-terrorism department of police, because most of these people who were murdered, they were in the urban areas, and it was essentially the responsibility of the police to investigate such cases and also to get information and intelligence about raw and other operators roaming about inside Pakistan or their helpers, supporters, sympathizers, and financials. Similarly, because we now have evidence that India has been financing all these murders through the UAE. So I think we need to share our dossiers with the FATF as well and ask them to put India on the blacklist or at least on the grey list. So it has to be a combination of all these efforts,
Right.
and that should continue in addition to the non-kinetic, political, diplomatic, and other legal measures that we can undertake.
Right, General Raza Khan, one last quick point I want to bring before you. Those revelations which were made by IIOJK's former governor, Satyapal Malik. Now, looking at this Guardian report, it talks about this particular approach of the Indian regime took shape after the Pulwama terror attack of 2019. So there was a quick pointing of fingers on the part of Indian authorities towards Pakistan without sharing any concrete proof or solid evidence. Now, later on, we saw those claims which were made by the former governor at that particular time of that terror attack in IIOJK. We said it was because of the incompetence of the Indian government that this took place, to which Pakistan's foreign office at that time had said that it vindicated Pakistan's stance. Now, by looking at this particular case, India is itself involved in a false flag operation and yet blames Pakistan. So why then there was a need, if such an approach took shape after that particular attack, which this particular report of Guardian talks about?
Well, I think in 2019, I think whatever happened, obviously, that could be negligence, as stated by the then governor of AJK, who was eventually arrested, by Modi government, and I think he is in the prison. I'm not aware if he has been released or not, because he told the truth. But I think there is also evidence available there that that was a false flag operations, and I think the information about this was shared in advance by a few channels which were very close to Modi at the time. So that is part of history, and I think unfortunately the international community condoned India even when that aggression was carried out against Pakistan, and we know the reasons that to them India is valuable because uh, they can contain China, which I doubt, but that is what they feel. And it is because of that that India is actually threatening the peace and security of not only the subcontinent but in the entire South Asian region, which is not in the interest of the big powers, the so-called friend of India. Neither is it in the interest of Indian people or the people of the subcontinent.
Lieutenant General retired Raza Mohammad Khan, senior analyst and former president of the National Defence University. Thank you very much for taking time out for Views on News tonight. Really appreciate that. In the studio, we were honored to have been joined by Mr. Nasir Ali Khan, former ambassador. Thank you very much for your time, Mr. Khan, for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. With that, we come to the end of today's episode. Till the next one, take good care of yourselves.